The views expressed on this podcast are Peter Dekom's opinions based on his legal experience, research, and academic work. The podcast does not offer legal advice. For any legal matters, always consult an independent attorney who can assess your specific situation. And now, on with the show.
Hello again, it's Peter Dekom, and hello to all of you. Hopefully you're enjoying the new year. I know a lot of people who aren't, but before I get into a whole bunch of stuff, I'm going to go and update a couple of things. You know, this digital crap that we all live in, where we're living anchored to our little smartphones or dumbass phones or whatever they are. There's an interesting survey that was done by the written up in the Journal of American Medical Association Network Open. And they basically said, hey, what happens when people detox or digitally detox, where they put their phones away for a week? What happens to their stress level? What happens to they probably get a greater fondness for kitties, but whatever it is, I will read. This is from the Wall Street Journal. A recent study in the JAMA Network Open found that when young adults did social media detox for a week, they had a reduction in anxiety and depression symptoms, as well as less insomnia. Ooh! About 400 people between the ages of 18 and 24 were instructed to use their phones normally for 2 weeks to get the baseline of screen time and other metrics, and then they were asked to reduce their social use time, and about 80% of the people were successful in reducing their social media time. Try it, you'll like it. But the numbers, average use went down from about 2 hours a day to 30 minutes. The participants were asked questions about their mood, activity, and sleep. Daily, after a week of their social media detox, participants on average had a 25% reduction in depression symptoms, a 16% decline in anxiety, and a 14% decrease in insomnia. So hang up immediately, stop listening to this stupid podcast, but maybe this is not quite so bad because you don't have to relate to it. You can just sit back and listen to it and yell and scream at me, which is a perfectly normal and human things to do. So also, another thing that interested me today is our complete surrender to China in EV manufacturers is coming home to roost. As Tesla's marvelously unsuccessful Cybertruck experiment resulted, my wife and I actually believe that is probably the ugliest car we have ever seen at any time in the history of the world. But it appears that Tesla just got blown madly away by China. China is now the biggest electrical vehicle maker for the second year in a row. Tesla is no longer in that race at the remotely the same level. And the more we sit there and say we don't believe in alternative energy, the more we say we're not going to manufacture the technology of alternative energy, the more we get gales of laughter from China, which is very happy to take advantage of that. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about God. I'm sure this is a pretentious thing, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but if I do, it's not intentional. The premise that I'm starting here, and I'll just sort of state it up front, is the more you have rule by law, which is basically a dictator telling you what the law is, as opposed to the rule of law, the worse the economy gets and the harder things are to take. It's very important because at the core of a lot of conservative thought and writings and wokeness and all the other words that don't mean crap is basically the notion that God is on our side and therefore whatever we do is right. It doesn't matter if it's cruel. It doesn't matter if it hurts people, to which I say BS. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my religious upbringing. I did this earlier in my podcast. But I was raised by a mom who was Russian Orthodox when she was born. That's why I'm completely unorthodox today. And I wound up becoming a parishioner at a very young age, local Episcopal church. So when we moved overseas, my mother married a U.S. Foreign Service officer, and we were posted to Beirut. I love Beirut. I'm sorry. So I've lived with Muslims. There was a Jewish section of Beirut. You know, I live in an industry where there are a lot of very successful Jewish people. All my friends just about are They're either not religious at all, or if they are, they're likely going to be Jewish. So I was an acolyte, aka altar boy, in the Anglican church in Beirut, a beautiful stone building right next to the ocean where the waves crashed up. And I spent a lot of time just thinking about God. I mean, it's not like I'm smart enough to figure out what God is or how we should learn about God. But I learned a very valuable lessons a couple of decades later. I was traveling in India. I love India. I was with a guide for 3 days. He was a guide who basically gone to law school. God perish the thought. Why would you do such? Oh, I did that. He was really smart, very educated, historically astute, worldly, kept up in everything going on the earth. Was an amazing conversationalist. But every time we went to a Hindu temple, he got blessed by the Brahmin and he got a bindi dot on his forehead. So after a couple of days, I sort of steeled myself and I said, okay, I'm going to ask a question. And I said to him, if I offend you, shut me down. But I'm wildly curious to understand how you basically account for your incredibly powerful faith. I mean, you are always being blessed by the Brahmin. You are very, very humble. You go to all the religious shrines and you take all of this very seriously. But you're also very Western, very educated, very worldly. And I have to ask this question. How does a man with your background, education, philosophical perspective practice in a faith which at last count had between 4 and 5 million known gods and goddesses? And he looked at me and smiled. And I knew I was either going to get reamed out or I was about to get a great life lesson. It turns out it was the latter. He looked at me and he said, Peter, I believe as you believe that there is but one God. But God reaches each and every one of us in a different way with a different face. So the Hindu faith is nothing more than providing you access to the Supreme Being, as they say in the hamburger commercial, Wendy's, your way. And I looked at him and I realized that all the great religions basically practice the golden rule. Doesn't matter whether you're a Muslim, a Hindu, a Roman Catholic, a Shiite Muslim, a Sunni Muslim, a Druze, a Maronite Catholic, that goes on and on and on. The basic premise of faith is not to sit in judgment of others, to accept them, be tolerant of them, treat them as you would treat yourself, and have empathy. I think that's a big word that we don't really appreciate, and show kindness and charity to everybody. Everybody on this planet, one way or another, is your neighbor, whether they're actually living next door to you or not. So that was a very big moment in my life, and I began to realize that if you really and truly believe in God on some basis, whether it's a formal or spiritual basis, all I can say is please get back to your roots. Please look at the texts, the spiritual texts that govern your faith. Read them. Read that New Testament if you're a practicing Protestant. Read the Torah if you're a Jew. Read the Quran if you're a Muslim. And although the Shia faith says, don't worry, the Imam will tell you what it means, read it anyway. All I can say is in all those tomes, there's a bit of history, there's a bit of histrionics, but at the core, there's also a guide, a life guide. And if we all start realizing that commonality of faith, it doesn't matter whether you're a Hindu or you're a Jew or you're born in Rome, right outside the Vatican. You kind of look at the world in a similar way. And what you have to sort of look at is if you are a kid and you're born in a part of India, what choice do you have? You're going to be raised as a Hindu, whether you like it or not. And that accident of birth cannot lead you to damnation. A lot of faith says if you don't buy what we're selling, you're going to go to hell. You're not going to like the hell. I'm thinking, what if we die and find out we were in hell? But we're not. We have choices. And I think the number one choice we all can make is to look after each other and to treat each other with respect. I have said over and over again, the use of labels, calling people a name and putting them into a category as if that defined who they were, is a profoundly disgusting habit. And it's profoundly negative because you don't give anybody a chance to be who they really are. That doesn't mean there aren't shits out there. There are lots of them out there. I'm a lawyer. I'm a professional shit dealer. But ultimately, what you have to understand, give everybody a chance instead of judging them because I am an evangelical and I want all you dead people to die more. Or I am a brilliant Roman Catholic and I will kill you because I believe in the Inquisition, because the Spaniards were right. At the end of that, none of that is correct. And we're getting a lot of people in today's world, not mentioning Ted Cruz by name. Oops. Or J.D. Vance. Oh, slipped out. How did that happen? Oh, I got to break the habit of just letting those words slip out. I cannot keep saying Ted Cruz and J.D. Vance and stuff like that, even though they're telling me that we live in a Christian nation. I was born and raised in a Christian family. That doesn't mean I live in a Christian nation. And so I decided, I heard somewhere that a guy who had something to do with the founding of the United States of America, a guy named Tom, I guess they call him Tom. Hey, Tom, yo, Tom. Tom was Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was, in today's world, he would have been outed as being a non-Christian. Well, not that he didn't believe in the premises of Christianity. He was a deist. He believed, as many, many people who practice spirituality as opposed to formal religion believe today, that what we're talking about, what we're dealing with, is an approach to life based on kindness and ethical responsibility. So here's a guy, he spent 2 years studying all kinds of stuff. He referenced the New Testament. This is a little known fact about Thomas Jefferson, but he did a cut and paste job on the New Testament and rewrote and created his own Bible. Yeah, our Thomas Jefferson was not a good Christian. He was a deist. He went to church, and he was heavily influenced by people like Francis Bacon, Thomas Locke, and other philosophers. And he sort of had a Unitarian approach to religiosity. And he really and truly railed at the thought of having a state religion. And you notice that the United States was part of England at the time, and the Church of England, or the Anglican Church, where I was actually an acolyte, was the official religion of England and all of her colonies. And that would include us. How exciting for us. And it just, something about that kind of rubbed him the wrong way. You have countries that believe Catholicism is the only way to be. You know, they're Sunni Muslims who believe in a literal interpretation of the Quran, who believe the only good Shiite is a dead Shiite. And there's Shiites out there who believe the Sunnis are so literal they don't understand the spirituality of God, but that the Imam or the Ayatollah, whoever the supreme religious interpreter of the Quran might be, will tell them how to worship it. Ultimately, religion and faith may look like they're mass practices. You may see 100 people in a massive evangelical mass, all raising their hands to God, thinking they were unified in their approach to God. But each and every one of those individuals understands God in a different way. And all I have to say is, if you don't see God as a fomenter of kindness, tolerance, and acceptance, you ain't reading it right. So when I see people saying, you're woke, you're wrong, I'm right, you're going to die and go to hell, I'm going to go to heaven, because it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter if I slam people and beat them up or shove them into cages and tell them that they need to leave. You know, we have immigration laws. Let's honor them. Let's take the cruelty out of it. Let's deal with people as human beings, as you would want to be treated if you were in a comparable situation. And then don't give me this crap, I'd never be there. You don't know that. If you were born in utter poverty and bullets were zinging your way past your head, and your farm was no longer producing stuff because somehow it all dried up and blew away, you might have a different approach to things. So part of this is to put yourself in the other person's shoes, sandals, boots, whatever they got on their feet, and try to understand what you would have been like had you been in the same circumstances. So we're in a situation right now where we are completely and totally governed by being divided. It's important to the political system You may have heard this expression when you were a lot younger. It means a whole lot today. And the words are divide and conquer. I don't like the fact that we're divided. And if anybody thinks our getting together is we'll all find a commonality, I don't think so. Well, what we really need to be is to be able to be together, not all believing in all the same things, but believing in certain core things, keep a country together, and let people have individual views and express them in a lawful and, I'd say, non-violent manner. We just respect each other. I feel like breaking out R-E-S-P. Okay, I can't sing, so I won't do that. But respect is as important to society as cherishing is in a marriage. And it's really important we start looking at people and not say, you're a, and then fill in the blank with something that you don't want to be and you don't like, and you're putting a negative, pejorative statement about who they are and then acting accordingly. I was making a comment, and not exactly a supportive comment, but one basically saying, look, I'm looking at all the members of the Trump administration repeating the same things, and they're collectively wrong. And I got a response back on the comment from a lady from North Carolina. She said, I don't listen to liberals from California. And I wrote back, you know what? I love North Carolina. My son went to college there. I spent a lot of time there. It's absolutely spectacular. I love the Research Triangle Park. I love all the academic accomplishments in North Carolina. I love beaches. Asheville, I'm sorry you got hit so hard by the hurricane. I love Asheville. And I have to say, everyone I ever met from North Carolina has been nothing but wonderful and warm to me. When I just said, and so if you basically give someone a chance, maybe you'll find that maybe they don't agree with a lot of the things they say, but how about looking for the stuff where you do agree? So there's some very strange things going on. If you read the news and you look at people expressing religiosity on an ongoing basis in social media and in old media, etc., you'll basically say that, okay, religion is what defines us today. You get people who are white Christian nationalists who say, we were always intended to be a white Christian nation. Bullshit! Did I pronounce that properly? I may have not done it right. But number one, if you're going to be Christian, how about as a threshold? Act like one! Forgiveness, tolerance, respect, do unto others. Please start there. It doesn't mean I'm a Christian and you're not. That's more like Chevy Chase, and that's not a religious approach to the world. The other thing that's happening is we're de-churching. It sounds like a very weird thing to say, de-churching. What the hell is de-churching? The number of people who go to church on a weekly basis, who are a member of a formal religious organization, synagogue, church, temple, whatever you want to call it, is declining. Even if you see people being more passionate about their religion, there are fewer people actually going to church. Now, that seems counterintuitive when you have 1/3 of the country basically saying, I'm sorry, but religion is the only thing we need to rely on, and the United States is a white Christian nation. No, it's not. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit more of that, but Christian nationalism has been a very important part of the MAGA movement. But it's strange. Let's look at some statistics here. By the numbers, nearly 3 in 10 American adults today identify as a religiously unaffiliated, a 33% jump since 2013. That's not that long ago. That's quicker than almost any major religious shift in modern U.S. history, and it's happening across all racial groups. This is an Axios analysis. The shift in religious activity is also leaving behind a trail of church graveyards or empty buildings that are now difficult to sell or have been abandoned, or you can see them on makeover programs as they take a church. Oops, sorry about that. Take a church and turn it into a lovely home or a restaurant or a hotel. And that's not happening just in the United States, it's happening everywhere. And yet, as life gets more complicated, as it's more and more difficult to explain, people look for answers. And faith is an answer. If you don't understand it, either God ordained it or God will take care of it. And that's okay as far as it goes. But when you replace God with a human being with toxic opinions in lieu of God and say God ordained or blessed this person, by the way, how did you know that? What gave you the hint that this individual was ordained by God? Did you see an angel fly in? Was there a telegram, a beam of light? What the hell made you think that person was ordained? I'm not ordained to do much of anything. And I'm trying to get people to basically say, you know what? I'm myself. Let me be myself. Let me believe what I believe. And I'll let you believe what you believe, but please don't denigrate me because I have passion for something that I really, really care about. I won't judge you. Or if I'm very religious, perhaps I'll just say to myself, that other person is reaching God in their own way, but it's the same God. So whether you're religious or spiritual, however you approach it, if you get pissed at science and you think these scientists don't understand God, I hate to tell you this, but God probably created the laws of physics and the laws of science and mathematics. So if you don't like science, you must really despise God who created all those laws. The laws of nature. Nature is another way of saying sort of a spiritual approach to the world. And it's very hard to understand how many people who are devout Christians are going around and saying things that are devoutly unchristian. And there's an answer for that. It's filling the space that religion has typically filled for most of us where we've had God. And that's basically finding someone, an authority figure, whether it's heavenly or human, who can actually help us understand the world, who explains it to us, and that we believe. Unfortunately, the guy that seems to have picked up the most following in this arena loves really, really lots of gold plumbing, gold ballrooms, loves to play golf. So you may not know this, but the U.S. government spent about $110 million paying for all the accoutrements of getting Donald Trump to his golf courses in 2025. And they're all mostly, his golf courses. And I'm sort of taking a look at all this stuff and saying, you know what? Why are you imbuing a man with obvious avarice? Remember the old putting a camel to the eye of a needle thing about wealthy people have the probability of going to heaven? How about just saying to myself, is this a man whose morality and character I respect enough to turn my opinions over to? And I will do it without question. I don't care if he's cruel. I don't care if there are people dying as a result of his decisions. I don't care if he lies. I don't care if the 10 Commandments are a checklist of things he's got on his bucket list. I don't care about any of that stuff. I believe. Well, I ask you on whatever you do it for yourself. Go to the underlying scripture. Go to the underlying faith. Don't even listen to your pastor. Your pastor at some point got an opinion, but it's not the pastor's opinion that matters. It's your opinion based on taking the time to look into the tenets of your faith. Or if you don't have a specific religion, look at the tenets of the moral structures that you believe in. All right, let's start going into the rule of law. And I've done this before. I started off early in my podcast because I was deeply concerned with people who basically didn't understand the difference between the rule of law and the rule by law. The rule of law is basically statutes, laws, rules that are agreed by commonality within the society where you live, and they're not determined by one individual. For example, you have a U.S. Constitution. It was a lot of people getting together to say, we the people basically created this structure, and the Bill of Rights, James Madison had a fun time drafting Constitution and the Bill of Rights. A lot of people inputted to that. And people elected the people who basically put together the Constitution and the amendments. We actually have seen times in American history where people were profoundly passionate about what they wanted in the world, where they actually believed that God had segregated the world into different cohorts. Some had value and others didn't. Whenever you hear someone demonizing somebody for traits that are not necessarily of their choosing, you're white, you're black, you're pink, you're Muslim, you're Hispanic, you're whatever, stop. You haven't given that person a chance. You don't know who that person is. But what you're doing is putting the label on them and acting accordingly. If you wonder where divisiveness comes from, it's people who tell you the label is determinative. And I've talked about the notion of socialism before. Half the people who say the word don't have a clue what the word means. It's basically where the government owns all the values in society, the factories, the land, and everything else. It's not about having health care or public education. It's not about, Social Security. Those are social programs. That word social keeps popping in. But because it sounds like social, we're being socialist, because it uses the same word, we reach the conclusion that really manipulative politicians tell you, see? Oh, does that mean social media is socialism? I guess not. Oh, well. So instead of looking at the label, make your determination who the person is. You may not like Mandami. You may not like his philosophy. You may not like democratic socialism. It may be something you would never wish for yourself, your friends, or your government. But before you reject it completely out of hand, why don't you ask yourself a question? What the guy stand for? What's he talking about? Do I care? If I don't care, I can reject it. But if I put a label on him and I make a decision based upon that label, I'm just a bigot. I don't care if you don't have to like everybody. You don't have to agree with everybody. You're certainly quite willing to disagree with them. But if you're going to use the labels, at least know what the hell they mean and understand who the person is and what's behind them. I lived in a Muslim country for, let's see, Christian and Muslim, Maronite Catholics, Sunnis, Shiites, and Druze. And I have to say, I loved living in Lebanon. I loved the diversity of religions. I loved the cuisines of each of the groups. I loved the people. I had friends of every faith. And you know what they were? This is a secret. They were people. And I liked some of them, and I thought some of them were shits. But I basically didn't make a decision about who they were based upon the label that somebody put on them. So it's not much to ask to treat people the way you would like to be treated yourself. And I see a lot of bias against Americans these days. Every mistake that we make as a government is now coming back to haunt us. Netanyahu is now the ultimate character of every single Israeli. It's not true. Israelis may back him. They may not back him. They may back some of it, but they're people. And if you deal with people as people on an individual basis, it's a whole lot better. Maybe we wouldn't have 70,000 people annihilated in Gaza. Maybe Jews would get along. By the way, Jews and Muslims got along great in the early 20s, etc. They got along. The kids played together. They didn't ask, Yahudi anti Yahudi, I'm in Maruf, huh? They just played, okay, we need to get back to that. There's a simplicity in goodness. There's a simplicity in kindness. And so now we get back to the rule of law versus a rule by law. We have been watching a very slow, maybe not as slow as I had expected. The last almost, 12 months have been the most seminal changes in the American psyche at any period in our history other than when we were at war. World War II, we had a different perspective. We'd put Japanese in internment camps, and that was okay then. No, it wasn't. It's never been okay. But we have, for some reason, we're allowed to have extreme opinions to vilify other people as we send soldiers out into the world to kill them. It's a very tough thing to send people out in the world to kill other people. If you're not treating them as individuals, The other question is, if you're Christian, if you're an American, what rules do you live by? And more importantly, what rules does your government live by? If your government lives by the rules created by a single man, and unfortunately in this case, we got no women have ever run the United States, although maybe you could argue that with my wife, but it's absolutely a situation where rule of law is autocracy, adhocracy. Let me go, I'll define each of these terms in a moment. Adhocracy means inconsistent, whimsical rule. That appears to be, okay, today I'm going to rule this way, and tomorrow I'll change my mind. Or the next day I'll actually go to another position. That's an adhocracy. Ad hoc means kind of change as you're going along. A plutocracy is a rule of people, a small group of wealthy people, and often they are comprised of people we call oligarchs. Oligarchs are rich people who pull the strings. And oligarchs, if you're rich, I hate to say this, but you really, really have a lot of more power than somebody who basically lives paycheck to paycheck. Now, you look at how some of the richest people in the United States live with major mega mansions. Not one, not two, 3 or 4. They may have a yacht. And I don't mean like a 50-foot sailboat. I mean a yacht, 150 feet. It's big enough to be a mini ocean liner. And it costs more money to run one of them yachts than most anything else you could do, because you have crew, you have insurance. Can you imagine the fuel when you're basically getting, a mile a gallon of diesel fuel? And then you've got jet planes. Gee, they don't pollute at all, do they? When they take off, there's no, oh, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. They pollute a lot. And then you look at someone who says, my jet's too small. I want a bigger one. Qatar, will you give me a bigger airplane? Thank you. It'll be to my, you'll give it to the government. The government will give it to me at my library, and it will be my plane. 400 million here, 400 million there. Doesn't mean anything. By the way, I need a ballroom. So I'm going to tear apart the White House, a secret house for all Americans, so I can build a damn ballroom. How many of you care about a ballroom? How many of you think that a ballroom is an essential part of who we are as Americans? I'm not one of them. I kind of figure when we're going through a difficult time, the last thing that I want to see is a president tearing up down the White House to build a ballroom and then having the balls to tell me that the taxpayers aren't paying for any of it. Taxpayers are paying for every square inch of that ballroom because the donors don't do it because they're nice, kind believers in ballroom law. They're believing that if they do this, they'll get favors from the government and they'll basically be exempted from maybe certain environmental regulations. Maybe they won't pay the same tariffs other people pay, or maybe they'll get some lucrative governmental contracts. But I promise you, the bulk of those donors are not giving that to the government or Donald Trump's whim because they want a damn ballroom, because they believe passionately Americans need that ballroom. It's fundamental to who we are. No, we're not. So I'd like to think that at some point, empathy is, as you may have noticed, sort of creeps into this conversation of political reality. Empathy is the single most important qualities we have as human beings. And if you look at the new ultra-right, white Christian nationalist movement, MAGA, whatever you want to call it, the one thing they object to is people who have empathy. Really? So that means if there's going to be a nasty time in the world, you won't feel bad if the people who you don't have empathy for pull out an AR-15 and blow your brains out. What? Oh, you have more guns. Oh, that justifies it. That's a much better idea. I look at the rule of law as something we're failing at. And when we have a government, Article 1 of the Constitution talks about the powers of Congress. Article 2 talks about the powers of the president. And Article 3 of the Constitution talks about the powers of the judicial branch of government. Those are the 3 branches of government, and they're all related to each other. The most powerful branch was always intended to be the Congress. Why? Because it had the greatest number of people deciding. I mean, in other words, in today's world, you have 100 senators, 435 voting members of the House of Representatives, and they're the people who are charged with making the laws. And somehow we thought that was a pretty good idea with that many people on board. We thought, wow, that should be a check and balance on everything. But we have a Congress that doesn't do anything other than what the president tells them to do. Remember, when you have a majority party running both houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and the president issues an edict, and the people in that legislative body who are in that party do whatever he says. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene wasn't my favorite human being in the world, but when she had the guts to stand up to someone telling her to do something she knew was immoral, she had the guts to say no. But there are a lot of people in Congress, and look, we've seen it with Democrats too. We don't want one person telling everybody what to do, and Congress has simply not done their job. They've abdicated it. And the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be the ultimate check and balance on all of the above, has been an enabler of autocracy. Autocracy is the concentration of power into a single source. And that single source is Donald John Trump. No matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, do you really want a government where officially we appoint one person to be our dictator? Remember the Soviet Union? Remember Stalin? Maybe I wasn't around either, but I read enough about Stalin. Khrushchev. I read. Is that what we want? We want to have a dictator who makes all our decisions for us? And unless we disagree, we get killed, we're imprisoned, or tortured. No, we don't have anybody trying to torture or imprison people who disagree with the president, do we? Oh, we do. And what is the Supreme Court doing about that? Not much. So we have a lot of decisions, and there are a lot of interesting variables in our judicial system because it's supposed to be a guardrail. I think it's a third rail. And what's fascinating about the judicial branch of government is not just the Supreme Court. To take a look at the literally hundreds of federal judges appointed for life who basically are making rulings that are in favor of individual liberties, against cruelty, against unilateral action, and against things that Congress has voted on and have been enacted as law. And they're all over the place. You see these judges. They were appointed by Reagan. They were appointed by Bush, both Bushes. They were appointed by Clinton, Obama, Trump. They're judges across the board who've been appointed, who take their job seriously. They believe, and I hope it's justified, that being a judge means you accept neutrality. You accept the rule of constitutional law or statutes that have been passed through the judicial process established by the U.S. Constitution. To the extent you don't like those laws, to the extent you raise a flag over your house that indicates you don't like democracy. I won't mention Alito's houses with the upside-down flag and the, oh, I did. I got to watch myself. I keep doing that. And you also want to trust your judges so that basically when they drive away in a brand new super mobile home that it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and somehow got paid for by somebody whose group continually, has cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, it's wrong. You know it's wrong, I know it's wrong, and they know it's wrong. And whatever else is said and done, it needs to stop. How we stop it, there are lots of ways to do that, and it's well beyond this particular little segment of my presentation. But why is Congress acting like a dork? Why is it sitting there letting a third party, someone who was not elected to Congress, determine everything that Congress does, or almost everything that Congress does? Huh? I'll tell you what a lot of people think is the causation. People worry about getting primaried, i.e., if I say what I mean and the chief of the party doesn't like me, he's going to endorse a candidate, and he's got so much power, such a following, that I can't even get out of a primary. So I'm not going to create controversy. Why did that happen? Simply put, social media. Every single move that an elected official makes, of an official or semi-official nature, saturates social media. People pick sentences out of context. They tear you apart. How do you exist within that? Do you think Congress people are having a good time as they're elected to office? I don't think so. It's the most miserable time to be an elected representative of the people in the history of this country, perhaps with the exception of that horrible period that surrounded the U.S. Civil War. But this is not a good time to be a representative. If you know in your heart of hearts that people who don't have the money to pay for health care are about to have their health care raised to a price where they cannot afford to continue to have it, and you're thinking, well, I think it's creeping socialism. I think you're just a creeping creep. But ultimately, you're looking at them saying, I make enough money, I have my congressional pension and my health care plan, and I don't care what happens to poor people. And they've come out and actually said that. We do not want the U.S. government to be providing health care for people. So instead, we don't provide it. And so what happens? They go to emergency rooms. And that means everybody pays more money. At some point in the time-space continuum, common sense has got to return. Maybe it doesn't. But if we don't have common sense, if we don't return to a situation where we're dealing with the rule of law and we're not dealing with the rule by law again is a fiat, it's a dictate, it's a mandate that emanates from a single autocratic source. Of law means that it comes from a consensus of people that we've elected or appointed to make laws. So if you like the idea of one person telling you everything that you should or shouldn't do, what's good, what's bad, what book you can read, where your kid goes to school, and you have make sure that in a time when disease is coming back, we've completely eradicated measles. Got bad news for everybody. Even if you want to vaccinate your kids and all the kids going to school, their parents don't want them to be vaccinated, you're going to have a measles outbreak. And measles kills. It's not a fun disease. We forget all this stuff from the past. We're actually seeing resurgences of polio because it's ruled by law, not of law. Individual human beings are making dictatorial decisions about your life. And no matter what freedoms you have to ask a question. If I exercise this freedom, is there a consequence for my neighbors? Is there a consequence for people around me? And do I have any responsibility to anybody but myself? We have a president who doesn't seem to have accountability for anybody except himself. I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent. I really think you might prefer to have people make decisions based upon the consensus that people need to have in a society where there's rule of law, where society decides what the law is, not where individuals decide. We have a lot of cases coming up. We have a lot of cases we've heard. I still do not understand the constitutional basis for the presidential immunity decision, U.S. versus Trump in 2024. I don't get it. To me, there's nothing in the Constitution would ever say the president is exempt from the law. That's just never been American history, ever, until 2024. But the Supreme Court, for whatever reason, decided that was a really good idea. It's one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. Kind of goes up there with, Citizens United. Rich people can write and influence elections any way they want. It's also up there with a number of recent election decisions where the Supreme Court saying, you know what? We're not going to interfere in how people district their states. We're going to let the states decide that, even if they're politically motivated to put their party in power. That's perfectly legal. It's called gerrymandering. That gerrymandering cartoon from 1812 of a giant gerrymander snaky thing, reptile. It's American tradition. The Democrats were the kings of gerrymandering after the Civil War during Reconstruction. So we don't have a representative government. We're not even included in the list of countries with representative democracy. We're just not there. What did Ben Franklin say when the group of people said, what kind of government did you guys create? And he looked at them and he said, a republic, if you can keep it. So we're getting to the point now in our world where we're not keeping it. And you're going to hate me, boomers who are in my generation, but I'm really, really unhappy about what we've done. We have a situation where defying the courts is considered acceptable, defying jurisdictional decisions. And we have people who do something called the emergency or docket decision, where they basically postpone a decision, but issue an injunction or mandate in the interim, which completely decides the issue without any arguments, without any discussion of the merits. It's called an emergency docket decision. We're having those decisions at a vast multiple of what they've ever been before. So I'm looking at my people here and I'm thinking, boomers, you blew it out your anal cavity. X generation, you put me to sleep. Okay, millennials, you're still waking up a little bit. Zillennials, you're more interesting. But Gen Z, oh my God, if you don't figure this out, we got nothing. And you may think, oh, I'm having a tough enough time getting a job. I'm having a tough time thinking about how I'll ever afford a home. Let me tell you something, Gen Z. Screw you. You take control. You create the new jobs. You push us old farts out of where we have blown it and take over. Please. I need you. We all need you. And you may not understand the responsibility we're asking you to take on, but I'm begging you. I'm Peter Dekom, and that's it for right now. Please do something about this country. Happy New Year.
If you would like to give feedback, suggestions for new topics, or have a question that might be selected for a future podcast, please email us at dekompodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time.